Welcome along, my friends, to another edition of Cosmic News. Coming up in this week's broadcast, what I believe is mounting evidence that the powers that be, the shadow governments, are trying to inform the public that Nibiru is here and will cause a biblical-type flood in the near future. The elite don't have the courage to come out and admit Nibiru is real and a terrible threat to our planet, so they do the next best thing: bring out films with all the subliminal message contained in them, warning us all that this event will unfold very shortly and that a geological pole shift of mega proportions will follow. Both newly released films Noah and the Exodus warn us all that Noah and the Exodus experienced past flybys of Nibiru, the planet of the crossing, and the terrible consequences for the Earth as this past event unfolded. The warnings are there. Ignore them and you may suffer an unimaginable end, so terrifying it's hard to comprehend. Okay, into this report, which originates from poleshift.ning.com and zetatalk.com, which was posted on the 22nd of March 2014, titled Noah and Exodus Movies. Two new movies will premiere in 2014, both relating to the pending passage of Planet X, aka Nibiru. Noah is due to be released in April and the Exodus in December. Per the Zetas, that this coincides with the announcement admitting the pending passage of Nibiru is no accident. The story of Noah and the Exodus are both biblical stories through the Egyptian historical records in the Kolbrin. The Bible has been altered, portions that offended leadership omitted, where the Egyptians stuck to the facts. That both these movies are emerging in 2014, the year the announcements admitting the pending passage of Nibiru is anticipated, is not an accident. Many have already become suspicious that the Endtimes has arrived based on droughts, dead fish and birds, signs in the skies and a perceived increase in the battle between good and evil. The Bible is expected to become a virtual reference manual by many following the announcement. The stories of Noah and the Exodus are clear examples of prior passages. The book of Revelations also has a parallel in the Kolbrin in describing the forthcoming passage. Beyond wanting to make a profit in the movie making business, the promoters of these two 2014 films hope to educate the public. Noah planned for flooding in a practical manner, building a watertight boat for his family and livestock. The message of the Exodus is that the good-hearted will assist while those intent on enslaving others will not. The Kolbrin reports on Noah differ somewhat from the biblical report and is more logical. For instance, Noah does not rescue every creature on earth, but focuses on domestic animals his family will need after the flood subsides. Noah describes the flood on page 128. The earth wobble that precedes a pole shift is clearly described. They had knowledge of signs and omens, the secrets of the seasons, of the moon, and coming of the waters. There were wise men filled with the inner wisdom who read the book of heaven with understanding and knew the signs. Then the day came when the lady of the night changed their garment from one of the different hue, and her form swept more swiftly across the skies. Her tresses streamed out behind in gold and copper, and she rode in a chariot of fire. The hour of trial draweth nigh. It has been told to me in a dream that the ship should be built against the mountains, and the sea will come up to me. The lowermost was for the beasts, and the cattle, and their provenders. And it was laid over with sand from the rivers, and the middle of one was for birds and fowls, for plants of every kind that are good for man and beast. The uppermost one was for the people, cisterns for water and stone houses for food. The ship was without mast or oars. There were no poles and no openings except for a hatch beneath the eaves, above whereby all things entered. Into the great ship they carried the seed of all living things. Grain was laid up in baskets, and many cattle and sheep were slain for meat, which was smoked by fire. They also took all kinds of beasts of the field, and wild beasts, birds and fowl, all things that crawl. They said to the mockers, "Have your hour, for ours will surely come." Then with the dawning men saw an awesome sight. There, riding on a great black rolling cloud, came the destroyer, newly released from the confines of the sky vaults, and she raged about the heavens, for it was her day of judgment. The beast with her opened its mouth and belched froth, fire, and hot stones, and a vile smoke. It covered the whole sky above, and the meeting place of earth and heaven could no longer be seen. In the evening the places of the stars was changed. They rolled across the sky to new stations. Then the flood waters came. The floodgates of heaven were opened, and the foundation of earth was broken apart. The surrounding waters poured over the land and broke upon the mountains. Storms and whirlwinds were loosed. There was a time of great heat. Then came a time of bitter cold. The waves over the waters did not rise and fall, but seethed and swirled. The stars in the heavens were loosened from their places, so they dashed about in confusion. There was a revolt on high. A new ruler appeared there and swept across the sky in majesty. The destroyer passed away into the fastness of heaven, and the great flood remained 7 days, diminishing day by day as the waters drained away to their places. Zeta Talk description, 15th of August 1995. Uneasy and being a highly serviced to other man, Noah gave the call and received visits from a spiritual guide who responded. He did indeed construct a boat to save himself and his family and household animals. The story of Noah has been romanticized to include all the animals of the earth, which doesn't take much logic to dispel. How big a boat was this? Where the waves were large, it did not cover the entire earth. How could it? Where the Bible cast the Exodus settings as a battle between the righteous Jews and evil pharaohs. The Zetas describe Moses as being an opportunist who took advantage of the passage of Nibiru to escape across the Red Sea. Though Moses was assisted, the Colbin describes the Exodus on page 641. The dark days began with the last visitation of the destroyer, and they were foretold by strange omens in the skies. All men were silent and went about with pale faces. Fear walked the land, and women became barren with terror. They could not conceive, and those with child aborted. The days of stillness was followed by a time when the noise of trumpeting and shrilling was heard in the heavens, and the people became as frightened beasts without a headsman. The dead were no longer sacred, and were thrown into the waters. He who grew no grain now owned a stone house full. Cattle were left unattended to roam into strange pastures, and men ignored their marks and slew the beasts of their neighbours. No man owned anything. The public records were cast forth and destroyed, and no man knew who were slaves and who were masters. Plague was throughout the land. The river was bloody, and blood was everywhere. Those who did drink from the river vomited it up. The dust tore wounds in the skin of man and beast. The doom shape called the destroyer in Egypt was seen in all the lands thereabouts. In colour it was bright and fiery in appearance, changing and unstable. It twisted about itself like a coil. It was not a great comet or a loosened star, being more like a fiery body of flame. Its movement on high was slow. Below it swirled in the manner of smoke, and it remained close to the sun, whose face it hid. There was a bloody redness about it, which changed as it passed along its course. It caused death and destruction in its rising and setting. It swept the earth with grey cinder rain, and caused many plagues, hunger and other evils. It bit the skin of men and beasts until they became mottled with sores. In the glow of the destroyer, the earth was filled with redness. The face of the Lamb was battered and devastated by a hail of stones, which smashed down all that stood in the path of the torrents. They swept down in hot showers, and strange flowing fire ran along the ground in their wake. The fish of the rivers died. Worms, insects, and reptiles sprung up from the earth. The gloom of a long night spread a dark mantle of blackness, which extinguished every ray of light. None knew when it was day and when it was night, for the sun cast no shadow. The darkness was not the clean blackness of night, but a thick darkness in which the breath of man was stopped in their throats. Men gasped in a hot cloud of vapour which enveloped all the land and snuffed out all lamps and fires. Ships were sucked away from their moorings and destroyed in great whirlpools. It was a time of undoing. Zeta Talk Insight, the 15th of November 1996. The last passage of Planet X is best remembered as the time of the Jewish exodus from Egypt. But what is not well known is the reason for the exodus. The Jewish exodus did not occur because this large group just decided to take a stroll one day, anticipating nothing worse than a whipping as the comeuppance should they be discovered. The exodus occurred because their masters were devastated and distracted by problems so severe as to take their minds entirely off their slaves. Would this have been a flooded Nile or a plague of locusts or even celebration when all got drunk? Nothing in the normal course of Egyptian society would have created a situation where the Jews would have left en masse, or even a situation where they all would have had the courage to leave. They left because the passage of Planet X imposed first a long night and then horrendous earthquakes and volcanic eruptions in nearby volcanoes. Chaos reigned. The very type of chaos that governments throughout the world fear lies in their near future. Guards left their posts and household servants stole from their masters and crept away in the seemingly never-ending night. The rulers held their heads in worry and discussed among themselves how they might placate the gods. The military elite used their utter control and tolerance, no challenges to their orders, react to chaos by trying to re-establish order. Hysterical troops, unable to comprehend what was happening to them, were in no mood to placate their superiors, and thus the military was engaged with internal battles for some time. It was not until the rotation of the earth was re-established that the Egyptian rulers and their military leaders were able to regain control of the troops. By that time, as history well tells, the Jewish exodus was a success. This next report originates from ZetaTalk.com. NASA is desperately trying to be inventive in their attempts to explain the Earth changes caused by the near presence of Planet X. They anticipate amateurs spotting an object in the sky and the vast debris-ridden dust tail. Their solution to this was ridicule. If the astronomers under a national security directive were saying it was not there, then who is the public going to believe, NASA or their lying eyes? They anticipate the increase in fireballs by claiming that asteroids, dark rocks hard to detect and track, had come of late from the asteroid belt. They anticipate red dust in the atmosphere, turning the skies red and landing here and there, an accumulation that was undeniable. This was claimed to be pollution in the air, settling out even when industries did not exist. Very early in the game, they anticipated the Earth heating up, based on measurements taken since the early 1980s, showing this process as a reaction to the newly discovered Planet X, identified by the IRAS team in 1983. Prior to this time, the globe had been cooling, so a clear change had occurred in the 1980s. Global warming was the answer, aggressively pushed by such notorious as Al Gore. As earthquakes rose in frequency and severity, the answer was to direct the USGS, which is dominant in the world, to drop and downgrade quakes. Any shuddering or shaking unexplained by earthquake statistics are attributed to fracking or mining explosions. The boom from breaking rock and heaving ground during plate movements are attributed to anything from aircraft breaking the sound barrier to fireworks. The volcanic increase was dealt with by restricting the media so only local coverage occurs. The most difficult symptom to address was the magnetic flux, which has pushed the magnetic north pole of Earth towards Siberia and befuddles pilots and those using the compass steadily since the arrival of Planet X in the inner solar system. This was addressed at first by NASA, claiming the sun was going frantic, having an extreme solar maximum, but reality did not support this. The sun was virtually asleep during this cycle. Then they threw out a quad pole theory, that the sun had developed more than one set of poles, but they could never coordinate what was happening on Earth to their various sun theories. Stuck with an increasingly twisting magnetosphere, NASA had been forced to invent an imaginary second radiation belt. The public, who had been barraged by all these theories, is getting increasingly skeptical. They noticed the Earth's wobble, which caused the sun to be rising and setting in the wrong place. And note how this and the errant moon, which likewise is appearing where it ought not, are ignored by the media. Meanwhile, the Planet X complex has become so visible it is seen by the naked eye. A second sun, and the sun surrounded by brilliant moon swirls. Expect an inventive excuse for this from NASA shortly. Perhaps this will be a result of the newly discovered and intermittent radiation belt. Okay, my friends, you're all invited to join this channel by subscribing to Endtimes 23, which is a totally free subscription service. You're also invited to add me as a friend on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. If you'd like to drop me a line on my blog, by all means do so, or if you'd like to join one of my circles on Google+, all the links are under this video. All this week's news links can be found on my website, endtimes23.com. The link is under this video. Just click on the link and go to the top left-hand corner of the opening page and click on the Cosmic News Links tab. You will find all this week's news links at the top of the page under this week's title video. Well, that's your lot for this week, my friends. I do hope you've enjoyed the show. I'll be back with you in a week's time with another edition of Informer News. So until then, this is your Informer signing off, friends. I'll see you on the flip side. For them, and you may suffer an unimaginable end, so terrifying it's hard to comprehend. Okay, into this report, which originates from poleshift.ning.com and zetatalk.com, which was posted on the 22nd of March 2014, titled Noah and Exodus Movies. Two new movies will premiere in 2014, both relating to the pending passage of Planet X, aka Nibiru. Noah is due to be released in April and the Exodus in December. Per the Zetas, that this coincides with the announcement admitting the pending passage of Nibiru is in the near future. The elite don't have the courage to come out and admit Nibiru is real and a terrible threat to our planets, so they do the next best thing: bring out films with all the subliminal message contained in them, warning us all that this event will unfold very shortly and that a geological pole shift of mega proportions will follow. Both newly released films Noah and The Exodus warn us all that Noah and the Exodus experienced past flybys of Nibiru, the planet of the crossing, and the terrible consequences for the Earth as this past event unfolded. The warnings are there. Ignore no accidents. The story of Noah and the Exodus are both biblical stories through the Egyptian historical records in the Qumran. The Bible has been altered, portions that offended leadership omitted, where the Egyptians stuck to the facts. That both these movies are emerging in 2014, the year the announcements admitting the pending passage of Nibiru is anticipated, is not an accident. Many have already become suspicious that the Endtimes has arrived based on droughts, dead fish and birds, signs in the skies, and a perceived increase in the battle between good and evil. The Bible is expected to become a virtual reference manual by many following the announcements. The stories of Noah and the Exodus are clear examples of prior passages. The book of Revelations also has a parallel in the Qumran in describing the forthcoming passage. Beyond wanting to make a profit in the movie making business, the promoters of these two 2014 films hope to educate the public. Noah planned for flooding in a practical manner, building a watertight boat for his family and livestock. The message of the Exodus is that the good-hearted will assist while those intent on enslaving others will not. The Qumran Welcome along, my friends, to another edition of Cosmic News. Coming up in this week's broadcast, what I believe is mounting evidence that the powers that be, the shadow governments, are trying to inform the public that Nibiru is here and will cause a biblical-type flood.